Boston Globe editor Brian McGrory this week issued marching orders for a reinvention of the paper. Among the goals, make the paper relentlessly interesting with no more obligatory stories. For decades, the Boston Globe prided itself in being the paper of record, but no more. In a memo to staff, Globe editor Brian McGrory says the paper needs to jettison that concept and become an organization of interest. If something feels obligatory to write, it's an obligation to read. In other words, no more stories like this. The other big takeaways include a focus on pushing news out right away with a new express desk. While McGrory says they aren't abandoning the print paper, it can no longer needlessly dominate our thinking. But perhaps the biggest change is tearing down the once impermeable wall between journalism and advertising. McGrory says the newsroom will establish groups to engage advertising and circulation to focus on subscriber retention. A few other things McGrory asks staff to picture. A newsroom that kicks to life before dawn. A wider range of fresher beats. And a room more inclined to pursue risk and more accepting of inevitable failures. Have courage. Well, Dan, as you said, the news side really isn't broken. They do some really, really fine journalism over there, and they even better in the last couple of years. But I think the boldest thing they've done is to admit that they need to cross the aisle and embrace advertising and circulation in a meaningful way. And I mean that in a positive sense, that they often see the trends. They engage social media a lot. They know stuff that the editorial, now obviously if they start saying, hey, you got to do more lottery stories or something like that, that's a danger. But I think they're probably going to embrace it in the right way.
That's a huge danger. And yes, I think they are going to embrace it in the right way. I think that's especially true with circulation because newspaper advertising is in a death spiral and it's not going to come out. So the Globe and a lot of other papers have really bet the farm on subscriber revenue, especially digital subscriber revenue. So it makes absolute sense that they have to have a closer relationship with circulation to figure out how to best get that circulation up while sticking to the basic journalistic mission.
What about some of the other stuff, changing the beats, starting earlier? I mean, you worked there, Joanne.
Yeah, no, I did. And I mean, I think there's room for improvement in terms of changing the mindset of, we all work toward that 5 p.m. deadline for the print paper. I agree that's got to change. It's a 24-hour continuous operation, and changing the structure of the newsroom a little makes sense. Where I worry a little, and I do think this is the best of intentions, is, first of all, obligatory journalism is often watchdog journalism. So that boring story about the sewer contract might not be thrilling to 100,000 people, but it might be really important to 10 people who make a decision that affects more people. So I don't want to see that go away completely. I also feel like because the journalism isn't broken, the beat system isn't broken.
No, I know.
And the idea of jettisoning the beat system for something newer and better, I'm not sure that's the answer.
Yeah, because the courts in the State House, man, they are just entrenched and they do great work there.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, no one writes a better intra-newsroom memo than Brian McGrory. I mean, he has it down to, yes, it's like high art when he does it. One thing I would suggest they look at is making customer service more responsive to readers. Well, I've ran into, and I will confess this on air, I'm one of those people who tend to go back and forth between the Globe and the Times for home subscriptions, depending on who's giving a better deal. When you tried a couple months ago to email Boston Globe customer service, you would get an email back saying, this account's not operative. I get that they don't want people canceling. I'm not saying that's why they did it. But you really want to make sure that your readers, if you're asking them to pay, and to pay more, as you've written recently, Dan, for this product, you want to be as responsive to them and as willing to work with them around their needs as possible. You tried, I think, a little while ago to cancel around a vacation, right? And
I wanted my money. I took a lot of time off, and they told me they had sent me a note saying that you're no longer going to get your money back. Well, I never got a note saying I wasn't going to get my money back.
No, that stuff should be, they should have that down to a T.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting. I'm going to be curious to see how it all works. Concern, I don't want to put concern. That's a value-laden word. I guess I'm a little cautious about a lot of emphasis on the organization, some on the content. To your point, I think some of their beat systems have been fantastic and have produced really great work. I also think some of those boring stories, quote-unquote, where that's our word, you look at it and you go, what? What are you talking about? And it really isn't. It is one of those organization of interest stories after all, and it's not just the 10 people who make the decision. It becomes a story that all of us need to know about. So that concerns me. I also, and I recognize this is my hobby horse, but I'd like to see understanding what the population looks like, and that Boston is a minority city, to see some emphasis about diversity throughout all of this structure. I didn't see that, didn't hear that, and that ought to be, if you're going to go forward into the future, understand who your audience is as well. You know,
Well, maybe they'll get that with their relationship with circulation.
You know.
One thing I would point out about this paper of record debate is that the traditional idea of a paper of record went away years ago. Not even the New York Times and the Washington Post does that anymore. So when I hear Brian McGrory use that phrase, what I tend to think of is what he's saying is there's no such thing as a story that's important but boring. Make the important interesting. I mean,
Well, I think that's what they are doing. And by the way,
I don't think that's what he's saying. I think when he says paper of record, I know what it meant at one time, that in this market, they were the ones that everybody said, why didn't the Globe do that? The Globe should have done that. That they felt the responsibility that we have to do all of this and other stuff
by
as
the
well.
way, the New York Times already has an express desk and some of these things, so it's not like
they
this is
borrowed.
completely. So there is a borrowing here.
And I will say
Anyway,
just quickly,
gotta
the
move.
smaller stories are often the ones that when you're building a beat, you do the smaller stories to
Exactly.
build the sources
Yeah.
to get the bigger stories.
Right.